Hello again. I'm not coming to annoy, but I'm gonna try to do as much as I can for today and any other incoming day. So let's see. So I can keep up with the manga. Chapter 61. Forget my husband, I'll go make money. Aristine's face was full of curiosity as she furtively lowered her hand and touched the horse. She could feel its short and smooth hair and the skin beneath it. It felt hot and sturdy. So this is how horses feel. One more thing she'd learn on her own. This is my first time riding a horse. And one more thing she was experiencing personally. This is the first time this guy is carrying anyone other than me too. As he said that, Tarkan held Aristine's waist tight. Her waist was so thin that it made him feel strange, that he couldn't let her fall. Hold on tight, it's dangerous. Aristine nodded and wrapped her arms around Tarkan's waist. When she felt the body in her arms stiffen, Aristine looked up to him. What? Move back a little. I thought you said to hold tight. Not too tight. Tarkan replied, trying his best not to look down, because it was easy to predict what kind of image he would see the moment he looked down right now. Aristine's wedding dress had a pure and elegant design, but the chest area was still quite exposed. However, even if he didn't see it, he could clearly feel it. Aristine was sitting sideways on the horse and holding Tarkan tightly. So her body was inevitably touching him. Tarkan only thought of her as a small and slender. So he frowned at the sensation that was much more vivid than he expected. Aristine was puzzled by his displeased expression. She figured she might have made some mistake, since it was her first time on a horse, so she nodded her head. All right. And so she tried to straighten up and move back, but her body slowed on the saddle, and she slipped. Tarkan was startled and quickly grabbed her by the waist, pulling her into his arms. Aristine reflexively clung to him. Once he confirmed that Aristine was safe, Tarkan heaved a sigh. Seriously, he couldn't relax his guard around this woman for even a moment. Aristine stuck out her head to assess the height, but from the ground, then she asked Tarkan, "It will hurt if I fall, right?" "Most likely." She was used to pain, but she still didn't like it. "Can we just go like this?" Tarkan didn't respond. He was still frowning, so Aristine studied his face in a sullen mood. Tarkan still didn't reply. And he didn't even look at her. However, his grip around her waist was very firm, to the point that Aristine was practically buried in his arms. Aristine smiled and leaned against him, while he held her tight so that she wouldn't fall. Clop, 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 clop. With the steps that were both heavy and light, the huge black horse slowly marched down the path of the wedding parade. People were watching Aristine and Tarkan with dazed expressions. Sorry. Like they were in a dream. Their mouths had fallen open ever since they saw Tarkan mount the horse with his cloak fluttering in the air. The Black Knight who saves the princess in fairy tales must have looked like this, right? Even though they felt it was a childish and embarrassing idea, they couldn't help but feel like they had gone back to their childhood. Falling asleep with children's books on their pillows, they waved their handkerchiefs after the two lovers who had overcome this trial of love. It's so touching. The people who were waiting along the parade and didn't know what happened were confused when they saw Aristine and Tarkan. They didn't understand. Why the couple was on a horse instead of a carriage? They certainly had no idea, but they looked good together. The visual effect was great. This was a special wedding parade, perfect for the beginning of the piece that everyone longed for. The princess who shone in a pure white dress was resting in the arms of Irigo's war hero and guardian. They look even better on top of the huge war horse than inside the carriage. A fairy comes to her kingdom, a fairy of peace for sure. Small and precious, it's the best. And since the two of them seem to have a great relationship, the people felt more than satisfied. Everyone knew what an arranged marriage was, but as people serving the royal family, they hoped for a marriage full of love. The happenings at the wedding spread through word of mouth and newspaper extras, making people soon even more. I heard she was surprised to see the people waiting outside the ceremonial hall. Then she smiled and waved. Look at this picture. I thought she would act proud and arrogant, because she's a princess of Sylvanus. But she didn't do that. Her friendly appearance, which was different from Tarquin's overbearingness, made people smile widely. Rather, the couple seemed to balance each other out because they were so opposite. This is the scene I was talking about earlier. The carriage was tilting, and the horse was going wild. But His Highness rescued the princess. It's already in an extra. And it looks like a perfect moment in this picture. To think he threw himself to save the princess in such a dangerous moment. Ah, such fiery love. The young girl who was looking at a picture of Tarquin, hugging Aristine with his sword drawn, tapped her cheeks with a dreamy expression on her face. I bet he must be worried because the princess almost got hurt. He hasn't let her out of his arms. I know, right? They got on it together instead of having the princess get on first. Then His Highness? How is this possible? The pictures alone make him look so cool. It's possible because it's His Highness Tarquin. Plus the two of them have very different physiques. The people who had been chattering turned their eyes to the news article again. There's a picture of Tarquin on the war horse with Aristine in his arms and the cloak flying in the wind. The reporter who got this picture needs an award. Best Reporter of the Year. It seems the reason why the extras were selling so hot wasn't simply because this was a national marriage. They felt the picture alone, made them feel at home in their hearts. A woman who had been looked at the picture for a while finally asked, "This is impossible for my boyfriend to do, isn't it?" Yep. At that resolute answer, everyone in the area fell silent. That's the end of chapter 61. Chapter 62. We'll just hold hands and sleep. You trust me, right? That pretty much says everything. What do you say? The queen slammed the table once she heard the court lady's report. How can Tarquin finish the wedding parade successfully? She had used various excuses to stall for time instead of sending a carriage. It was completely in vain. Rather, she only earned the king's displeasure. I should have known that lowly thing is like a weed. It refuses to die easily. The queen's father, Duke Esquiela, mumbled while rubbing his chin. Ha! The rode a horse. How can a war horse meant for slaughter be used in a wedding parade? Exactly what I'm saying. And this is a marriage for peace. A war horse is certainly not appropriate. Right? It is as you say. Duke, surely the people must have reacted badly to this. After all, they desire peace so much. Isn't so? The queen asked the court lady who was reporting this information. It was phrased as a question, but in reality, it was no different from asking the servant to say yes. But she told a lie. She would be faced with anger for deception. The court lady swallowed and prostrated on the floor. If I may dare speak, your majesty, the queen's brow rose. At this response, the reaction was better when they were in the carriage, as they were together on the horse. Instead of just sitting side by side in a carriage, they crash. The queen threw a teacup, and it shattered into pieces as it struck an amethyst-decorated pillar. Your Majesty, please quell your anger. And the court servants fell to their knees and knocked their foreheads on the ground. The people are ignorant by nature. If Your Majesty the Queen guides them to the right path, they will turn around right away. In other words, manipulating public opinion. It was easy to spread rumors in a crowd. Hence, it was a hard task to guide the direction that things would spread, as long as you had money and power. The Queen was pleased with this answer, and calmed down as she leaned back into the sofa. Public opinion, you say? Duke Escala pondered over it for a moment. Then he opened his mouth, with a heavy look on his face. Your Majesty, Tarkan's war steed is quite a symbolic one. If we treat it as a normal war horse and try to weave a narrative, we might suffer backlash instead. The Duke of Escala was right. Just as Tarkan was revered as a hero, the horse that always fought beside him was also treated as a legend. What would people's response be if such an existence was labeled as a slaughterer or a peacebreaker? Although the people are said to be ignorant, that didn't mean they were stupid. They would be suspicious if random people suddenly started making such claims at the same time. You're right. The Queen also agreed with him. Earlier she was angry. So angry that she looked for anything to condemn Tarkan with, but riding a war horse could never bring criticism. Irogo was a land of warriors, and a warrior's horse was considered the most important thing. The next most important thing was naturally a warrior's war steed. We can call a war horse a slaughterer, or anything bad to begin with. Yes, especially since Tarkan, that lowly thing, rode the horse while subjugating demonic beasts. A war horse that subjugated demonic beasts alongside Tarkan. If anything, the people must regard it as a guardian that brought peace to Irigo. The Queen burst into anger, and here I thought this was a never-seen opportunity to deal with that lowly thing. There was nothing else they could use. Tarkan was already very popular among the people, and the wedding today raised his status even more. The common people are not the only issue. The noble seems quite interested as well. Very few were wavering until his arranged marriage with the Princess of Sylvanus was decided. Even then, there were many who ridiculed it, asking if that would make Tarkan's blood noble. Such words were mixed with flattery, but in reality, that was truly how most people thought. Regardless of how much the king loved Tarkan, or how popular he was with the people, the nobles merely scoffed, thinking that was all he could amount to. They were convinced that Hamil would be the one who ascends the throne in the end. Above all, most nobles didn't want to crown Tarkan, who had a commoner mother, as king. Furthermore, Tarkan has shown himself to be very inept at politics. He should have pressured Hamil using his popularity with the people, or establish his position by using the king's favor as bait. However, Tarkan did neither of those, even when other royals mocked him with showy remarks. He only shut their open mouths with intimidation. He never faced any of his opponents with political competence or ability. Hence, everyone labeled Tarkan as a politically incompetent. That was the case, but that has changed. Tarkan, who has seen as helplessly inept in politics, stepped forward and protected the princess when the princess was in danger of being seated in the lowest ranking area. Contrary to what the nobles and the queen expected, Tarkan's speech was fluent and unreserved. He pressured the queen with political wordplay and achieved what he wanted. Because of this, people couldn't help but think that it's not that Tarkan couldn't participate in politics, but that he hadn't. And when you add the princess to that, the princess who has to become Tarkan's wife not only had the exceptional bloodline, but her political skills were admirable. She was the definition of giving wings to a tiger. On that day, the nobles had no choice but to give Tarkan another look. And with the wedding today, which many claim to have surpassed the word perfect. After the bride and groom left the wedding hall, people in the hall gather in groups and chatter excitedly how the wedding went. Even if you ignore the lower nobles who couldn't participate in the fight for the throne, there were still quite some powerful nobles involved. Those noble bastards, they were acting one way not too long ago, but changed their attitudes at the wedding today? Remembering those nobles who were watching Aristine and Tarquin with delight made the queen fume with anger. It is simply preposterous. How can they be so moved at the wedding of that lowly thing? It's not as if they don't know how important of an issue this wedding is. Instead of obstructing it, they're praising it. Even if you consider that they're not part of our faction, I simply can't understand it. The number of people in the Queen's faction was limited, because the more people there are, the more would have to share the achievement. But still, that was enough. In fact, people in other factions have been trying to get on their good side by telling them they support Hamil as well. The wedding can possibly make them reconsider Tarquin, right? How can that lowly thing ever compare to Prince Hamil? Those fools that used to chase after us before. They don't know their place. With such a family, how dare they compare us with Tarquin? The Queen and the Duke couldn't hold back their anger and seethed with rage. Frankly, the reason they were so angry about this was because they were anxious. Your Majesty, what should we do? The Duke of Usciela asked with a grave expression on his face. We can't move too rashly, because the attempt to send a carriage was blocked. His Majesty the King must be. He didn't say anything, but I'm sure he's watching. The Queen let out a frustrated sigh. She thought this would put Tarquin in a predicament, but he benefited from it, while she was left with a negative effect. This was a complete defeat. Royal Mother. Right then, the door of the receiving room swung open, and a loud voice rushed in. It was Jenny Carina. Have you seen this article? Jenny Carina looked pale, and she was carrying the evening newspaper in her hand. On the front page was a huge banner of Aristine and Tarquin kissing. Look at what this thing says. It's calling the half-wit princess Irigo's hope, or the angel that brought peace. The agitated Jenica was ballistic. How dare they say such a thing? Jenica is this country's joy, hope, and happiness. That's the end of chapter 62. Chapter 63. Jenica took great pride in the fact that she was the most beloved princess among the people. It infuriated her to see even a single compliment meant for her being given to someone else. And it's so that to that scorned princess of all people, grandfather, Jenica is upset. Jenica is the one that's an angel. Jenica looked like she was about to cry as she clung to the Duke of Usciela. Of course, my princess is an angel. But they're calling the half-wit of an angel of hope. Our princess is the hope of this country. No, this world. So don't worry about that foolish princess. Duke Usciela stroked Jenicarine's hair as he comforted her. Jenica knows that too, but when they put out this kind of article, someone might make a mistake. Jenicarina continued to complain, and hearing that, the Duke of Usciela burst into laughter. Don't worry, Your Highness. As if she was waiting for those words, Jenicarina's eye twinkled with anticipation, and sure enough, her grandfather gave her an answer that met her expectation. I will meet the owner of this daily paper soon. Really? Jenicarina broke out in a happy smile and threw her arms around the Duke of Usciela. I love that so much, grandfather. You're the best. Duke Usciela smiled warmly at his granddaughter, who was still as cute and innocent as a child even though she was an adult. The queen frowned slyly as she watched this, and she called the Duke of Usciela father. Don't worry, Your Majesty. You know what kind of a person your father is. Duke Usciela patted Jenicarina's head and continued. I know very well that His Majesty the King will be watching. I will not discuss anything regarding... thou low-born with the president. It would be foolish to do anything that would put a target on them in this situation. If their weak point was caught, they would not be able to act freely. But I can talk about how kind and lovable our Princess Karina is, and how cute and pretty she is. The Duke of Esquila proudly motioned to Karina as if he was showing her off to the Queen. His Majesty will not be concerned about such. He's proud of his daughter, so I'm sure he will be happy. At those words, the Queen also smiled. She stroked her daughter's cheek gently. Then she opened her mouth. Indeed, His Majesty the King's love for Karina is incomparable. Karina giggled a little and let herself be touched, but a part of her felt cold and sank heavily. As her royal mother said, the royal father's love was naturally hers. However, Aristine, her royal father's attitude towards Dahab flashed in her mind, and a fire ignited in her chest. No, no way. Janica is special. She was the only one who knew about the King of Irigo's symptoms, but protected his secret instead of using it. As such, her father's favor was forever hers. Right. Even at the welcome banquet, royal father took Janika's side, when that no-good princess dared to try to take her seat. Her father stepped forward. It must have been heartaking for him to see his most beloved daughter being subjected to such cruel persecution before his eyes. She tried to ignore the fact that her father gave the princess a seat in a much higher position than herself. After all, it couldn't be helped since there was no other seat. Her royal father even said, This is how it was at the time. That it didn't have any special meaning. Despite thinking this way, a shadow was cast over Karina's face. Duke Esquiela saw this and patted her shoulders in comfort. He wondered if she was still bothered by the princess' glamorous bridal appearance in the newspaper. Do you want me to buy you a new dress, my princess? I should buy a bunch of clothes befitting of a beautiful princess, with matching hats and gloves too. Seriously, grandfather. Karina pouted cutely. Then she glanced at Duke Esquiela, showing she wasn't opposed to the idea. Put necklace and earrings too. She added in a small voice, and the Duke of Esquiela grinned from ear to ear, feeling like his granddaughter couldn't be any cuter. I'll get your bracelet, a brooch, and new shoes too. My grandfather is amazing. Karina hugged the Duke's neck tightly. Duke Esquila smiled broadly and patted Karina on the back. The gloominess on Karina's face disappeared completely. That was unsurprising, since her favorite hobby was to doll herself up beautifully. Take the best pictures and distribute them to the newspaper. Then the newspaper would take that picture and write an article praising Karina as the absolute best. For example, she's the jewel of the kingdom, flower of the kingdom, the brightest star in the kingdom's songbird, and so on. All sorts of compliments were stringed together, then an article was published. Not only that, but they also took pictures of her, doing small things like smelling flowers at a picnic, giving money to a poor beggar girl while passing by. It was nothing like manipulating public opinion, since she actually went to a picnic, actually smelled flowers, and actually gave a beggar girl a gold piece. It was all for taking pictures. But the results were the same anyway, right? It was good for everyone. She deserved to be loved. So it was only natural that she let the people know that too. And thanks to her lovable self, the popularity of the royal family will increase, and the pride and respect that the people have for the royal family will increase too. Honestly, isn't everyone benefiting because of Janica? Karina admired her own greatness. Janica is a true angel of peace. Yes, let's go shopping. And call a photographer too. There's a room in Jenica's palace that was remodeled recently, and it will be perfect for a photo shoot. Jenica chattered excitedly. Our princess will look much prettier printed across a newspaper than this kind of princess. Duke Esquiela chuckled and tapped the newspaper on the table. Ho, 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 indeed. Oh, Jenica is my daughter, and such a lovely child. She's better than a princess who was imprisoned and barely treated as part of the imperial family. The queen said with a smile, but as she glanced at the newspaper, her face hardened slightly. Even if she had tried to scorn it, Aristine truly looked beautiful in the picture. The newspaper was filled with photos from the wedding today. The photos covered the event in the ceremonial hall to the right down to the wedding parade. Aristine and Tarkan walking side by side, facing each other and bowing with a kiss. Aristine being escorted to the golden carriage, the two of them sitting in the carriage. It even had the image of Aristine being safe and Tarkin holding her in his arms while they rode on the horse. There were so many different photos that she didn't know if this was supposed to be a newspaper or a photo album. It looked as if the reporter had given up on choosing a photo and decided to show everything that looked pretty, while thinking the more, the better. The queen clenched her fist. She wanted to head to the newspaper company right now, grab them by the collar and ask them what they were thinking by publishing an article like this. It was obvious what the common people as well as the nobles would think when they saw such an article. The nobles had been agitated since at the last welcome banquet, but they didn't say good things about Tarkan, and Aristine like they did today. It was partly because they were surprised and flustered by the unexpected situation, but it was also because they had no tangible incentive to change their attitude. Under such circumstances, the wedding today became a very good opportunity. There was only one reason for this. Because they looked convincing. It was really an insignificant reason, but on the contrary, that was why it held a lot of power. People are such strange beings that at times, reason and logic alone cannot persuade them, because of the very illogical and emotional reasons, such as not really feeling it or somehow don't like it. The convincing feeling was the same. It was very illogical and an emotional reason, but once the feeling was in your heart, nothing could overpower it. The wedding between Aristine and Tarkan today looked convincing even to the queen. It really looked like a sacred wedding for Prince, and each appearance of the couple in these photos also looked very convincing. That's the end of chapter 60. Next is chapter 64. No. Your Highness the Princess. How is your skin so soft and smooth? Your skin looks like it's glowing, even without doing anything. The court ladies admire Aristine's body as they wash her with milky bath, water mixed with perfume oil. Aristine sloppily listened to their discussion while feeling exhausted. A lot of things have happened today. The wedding alone was tiring enough, but with the various incidents that occurred, her stamina was at its lowest. Sylvanians tend to have fair skin, don't they? Is this also a Sylvanian thing? Come on now, how can that be? A court lady rebuked it with a chuckle. Then she glanced outside. The door was closed, so they couldn't see outside, but they knew the Aristine's handmaids from Sylvanus were there. Those girls have fair skin too, but her Highness's skin is so clear that it feels like it's shiny. It's not the same. You're right. I can't touch it, but their skin doesn't look this smooth either. True. The court lady, who asked if all Sylvanus were like this, nodded as well, looking convinced. Of course. Your Highness is the best. It's literally an honor to serve you, Your Highness. His Highness Tarkan must be happy to receive a bride like Her Highness. Wow, this really makes my heart race. Don't worry, Your Highness. We have prepared everything perfectly. Nothing was left out. We've made sure the decorations bring out a really romantic atmosphere that anyone can see. Once Your Highness lies down there, then everything is practically done. The court ladies laugh impishly, their eyes curving a crafty arc. Even your night dress was chosen after a lot of thought, so please look forward to it. Oh my, shouldn't His Highness Tarkan be the one to look forward to it, instead of Her Highness? The court ladies giggled delightedly like the little children. They were a very lewd band. In reality, Aristine had closed her eyes and was struggling to stop her mind from floating away. She felt like she was going to fall asleep the moment she faltered. The new bride, who was soaking in the bath, wasn't even listening, but the excited court ladies were giggling amongst themselves and making noise. They were truly happy to have such a beautiful and intelligent princess. All the court ladies served their esteemed prince with utmost sincerity and such. They want the prince to have a wife suitable for him as soon as possible. There was a huge difference between a palace that had a mistress and one that did not. Honestly, I was getting worried that Diana girl would become His Highness' wife. There were quite a few court ladies who liked Diana, but these women weren't one of those. Of course, they also liked Diana at first, until we saw Diana's true colors, that is. Even ever since they found out by chance, they couldn't help but feel Diana was despicable when they saw her do what she normally does. However, Diana was the younger sister of the great General Yugon, who died in the line of duty, and the daughter of a count. While they were only court servants, they couldn't let their dislike show. All they could do was ignore the court servants who followed Diana and focus on serving Aristine. And the maids from Sylvanus cannot be trusted either. Normally, the preparation for the bride's first night was done by the maids from the bride's home, because they were servants that the bride could treat comfortably, and that would ease the bride's nerves. However, the perceptive court ladies noticed earlier that this bunch did not serve Aristine sincerely. They could also sense that Aristine didn't like them either. So, under the pretext of familiarizing the bride with Iriga's culture, they volunteered to take care of the princess on the first night. Please read this. Your Highness, please get up. It is time to get a massage. Aristine, who had been leaning against the tap in half-day stays, lifted her body upright. Seeing this, the court ladies felt proud for some reason. She must have been very nervous since this was her first night, but she was able to get this relaxed because of their efforts. She felt like Aristine was comfortable around them, and the corner of the lips kept rising. You are doing great, Your Highness. Keep relaxing like this. The more relaxed your body is, the better your night will be. Ah, for a good night's sleep, of course. Ho, 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 ho. The lewd bunch burst into laughter again. They doused Aristine's body with a perfume oil blend of roses, lilac, ylang ylang, peonies, cedar, musk, and amber. This was also something that they had personally researched because they didn't want to apply ordinary perfume oil on their Highness the Princess. The wheel of the court ladies for the first night was burning. They gently massaged Aristine to relieve her fatigue and tension. Aristine let out a satisfied moan at the pleasant touch. It seems her muscles were very stiff after she almost fell out of the carriage and almost fell off the horse. The feeling of her stiff muscles relaxing at their touch was a very refreshing feeling. So this is the life of a princess wife. It was so great from the first night. Ah, this means I'm no longer the guest of this palace, but the owner, right? Aristine's eyes sparkled at the sudden thought. I can have tea time whenever I want. Her heart was pounding with excitement. Strawberry cake. I want to try one, but can I ask them to make it? She certainly could. Aristine was now Turcan's wife, both in name and reality. Feeling Aristine's heart suddenly beating fast, the Ker ladies went, "Oh dear," and slowed down their hands. They thought she might be feeling uncomfortable and checked her expression, but it was full of joy and excitement. Seeing that, the Ker ladies also grew joyful. Yes, of course, this was a happy time. Who wouldn't be excited? Just one look at His Highness Tarkan, and you can tell his body is just... Looks like our princess will have a very passionate night. It was worth the length they went through to prepare the bridal chamber. While they were overwhelmed with happiness, Aristine was also happy on her own. I can try some macaroons, and sacher torch too. Sacher torch was something that she had always been curious about while watching her younger sister eat it. And as for the macaroons, her older brother had secretly given her some once, but she couldn't remember how it tasted. Could only remember thinking it was delicious. I should remember once I tasted, right? Now that she had a good memory, she would never forget it again. Now, there is only one thing left to do. Here, your highness, please raise your arms. The court lady who was holding the nightdress, meant for the first night, smiled brightly. Her smile was both kind and friendly. However, Aristine couldn't do as she said. Aristine looked at the piece of mesh in the court lady's hand and froze. As someone who was always doing things at her own pace, she couldn't help but be stunned. This was no clothing. It was a piece of cloth with holes in it. This? Can this even be worn? That's the end of chapter 64. Last one, chapter 65. The night breeze carried the smell of flowers to the garden. The spring was at its peak, and the wind blowing at night was both gentle and humid. Tarkan walked down the long hallway, lost in thought. He was heading towards the bridal chamber, prepared for the newly wedded couple. That made him feel complicated. The first night. He never imagined that those words would make him feel trouble. He had never considered making anyone his bride, but her. He certainly wouldn't have accepted this marriage if peace had not been at stake. Even if it was the king's order, he would have refused till the end. He had no choice but to get married, but he planned to live a life completely separate from his wife. In return, he was going to give his wife all the power and wealth worthy of her position as a princess. Many arranged marriage partners didn't even bother to do that, and love was, of course, an unnecessary element in an arranged marriage. Hence he hoped the princess would be satisfied with that much compensation. Besides, he thought that the princess of Sylvanus with golden blood would naturally despise a husband like him, who had low-leaf blood. However, the princess he met did not align with any of his expectations. Aristine? He called her name in a small voice. He had never called it before, so the pronunciation fell awkward on his tongue. His gaze swept over the hallway. The dim hallway shimmered with the soft glow of moonlight and dim lighting. It reminded him of the way the hanging crystals at the top colorfully reflected the dazzling sunlight at noon, seemingly at the same time. How he traced Aristine, walking in her wedding dress, as though it was welcoming her. Her eyes smiling softly at him. They don't look alike at all, Tarkan mumbled, as if to inform himself out loud. It was as he said. He couldn't find a single part of Aristine that resembled that child. But then, why? Tarkan clenched his fist. His slow steps abruptly came to a stop. The first night meant nothing to him. That should have been the case. that he himself didn't even know why he was so agitated. Aristine was the one who first drew the line before the marriage, stating that it was a business relationship, so he doubted she would demand anything in particular from him on the first night. However, in an arranged marriage, a child was the most important thing, because it was only when a child was born with the bloodline of both families that it could be said to be a true union. So naturally, Aristine would think that they were going to consummate the marriage on the first night. Something soft and fluffy. You don't know what that fluffy thing is? I like that soft and fluffy feeling. Feels good when you lay on it. No, I'm not too fond of it wide. I'm fine as long as it's not too narrow. When it's too wide, it just leaves a space. The words Aristine exchanged with the court ladies rang through his mind. Tarkan's brows rose sharply, his forehead creased slightly. No matter how he thought about it, it sounded like she was looking forward to a great night. I have no intention of doing that with that woman. He didn't want to be intimate with someone he didn't even care about. Some men may be content to have a very beautiful woman as a wife. They might be able to spend the night pleasantly even if they don't love their wife. But Tarkan was not like that. Tarkan couldn't do such a thing. A woman he didn't love nor have feelings for, especially when he had another woman in his heart. Tarkan, who was pure and modest, contrary to his wild appearance, was riddled with anxiety. Aristine was a strange woman. She was both eccentric and absurd, and you never know what she's going to do. Plus, she was a pretty good person. His one and only partner. Tarkan didn't want to hurt her, but if he refused the first night, Aristine would be hurt, and she's looking forward to it so much. There were other issues beside the fluffiness in question, and this part was more serious. A week ago, the girls' ladies suddenly came up to Tarkan and asked him, "Your Highness Tarkan, may we ask a question?" Tarkan was a little puzzled by their resolute question. He could count on one hand the number of times a court lady had spoken to him first. They were strangely uncomfortable with interaction. But for them to ask a question, Tarkan wondered what the issue was. So he readily agreed. At that, the court ladies brightened up and revealed that they were holding, with a "foop" sound, a few items appear majestically in the air. The court lady who asked questions pointed to it and asked spiritedly, "Which one of those does your highness like the most?" The item that the five court ladies were each holding was, "This is the nightdress for the first night. Her Highness Aristine is going to wear it." The eyes of the court ladies twinkled with anticipation, as if they were asking him to quickly pick one of the clothes that they have prepared. This was the first time that Tarkan had seen these court ladies act so lively since he began living in this palace. As if they were trying to appeal to him, they competitively waved the nightdress that they were holding. Flutter, flutter. The piece of cloth that was almost as small as his palm shook violently in the air. "These things could hardly be called a nightdress. What do you think you're doing right now?" Tarkan asked with a frosty glaze in his eyes. A chilly breeze, colder than the north wind, froze the court ladies in place. My apologies, your highness. Forgive me." As the court ladies shivering as they turned blue, Tarkan didn't feel good either. He clicked his tongue and turned away. "Leave." At those words, the court ladies slowly left the room, while trembling. Once he was alone, Tarkan didn't feel comfortable about it. He didn't enjoy intimidating servants. But for a moment, even his bloodthirst had leaked out. There was a high chance that the frightened court ladies would shed tears just by seeing Tarkan's child in the future. Tarkan thought it over for a moment, then he left the room. He was thinking of alleviating a little of court ladies' fear. That's the end of chapter 65. Chapter 66. Not long after, Tarkan left the room. He spotted the core ladies quiet easily. They were sitting down huddled together in one corner of the garden. It seems they had been terribly frightened since they couldn't even raise their heads. Tarkan carefully approached them. We have to go with this one. His eyes stayed 0.3 seconds longer on this lingerie. 0.3 seconds, then let's go with it. No, when His Highness saw this lingerie, his eyes shook faster. I'm telling you, it was at the speed of sound. Huh? The speed of sound? The core ladies were disoriented as their eyes went back and forth between the two pieces of clothing. They claimed that it was a nightdress, and were having a serious discussion about it. But anyone could tell it was lingerie in their hands. What do we do? They're both pretty. Since the colors are different, should we go with the color that suits the princess the best? The princess is like a fairy, so both black and white look good on her. That's true. They're all going to light a fire. What should we choose, though? The core ladies sighed loudly together. They mulled over it with agony, looking as if there was no question more difficult in the world. Let's make this. let's make it the sexy black. The first night should be white. That's just prejudice. There's a reason it is a tradition. The core ladies began arguing again, acting so serious about the whole thing. Tarkan was frozen in place and couldn't bring himself to move. She's already wanting to wear the white dress. She should show off a different, opposite charm when she takes it off. At those words, all the core ladies shut their mouth. That was indeed the decisive answer. Since both of them would look good on the princess, they just have to think of it from a perspective of the person who will see the princess. After a brief silence, a burst of strange laughter ripped through them. The core ladies grinned from ear to ear. His Highness will be very surprised when he sees the princess wearing this at night, after seeing her in that beautiful-looking wedding dress. Why? You think he's just going to be surprised? It's going to get hot. Ah, I can't wait till Her Highness wears this to see His Highness Tarkan. If the princess wears this and just look at His Highness Tarkan, it's game over. I heard that when someone who shows no interest in women is awakened, they're very tenacious. Oh my God. Who knows? We might hear news of a second highness before the year is over. Referring to her pregnancy. The core ladies crackle like beads rolling on a tree. They didn't look the slightest bit scared by Tarkan's bloodthirst. As he watched them, Tarkan somehow couldn't find it in himself to walk closer to them. He slowly took a step back. Even when he stood before the great demonic beast, Murzika, at the age of 10, he did not step back. But he was backing away when faced with laughter of these core ladies, but he didn't even want to deal with this. Tarkan frowned after recalling the scar in his memory. The black lingerie that the core ladies chose was truly terrible. It was so small that he wondered if he could even cover anything, but there was apparently not enough because it was even made of mesh. And he had a strange string and a strange... Anyway, it was surprising that something so confusing and bizarre actually existed. She should show off a different, opposite charm when she takes it off. If the princess wears this, they look good on her. He didn't want to remember it, but the words of the core ladies echoed in his head. And Aristine stood in the midst of that sound, wearing a mesh lingerie with black lace and a hanging string. Tarkan simply couldn't look down and stared at her face. However, her slender neckline and fully exposed, her shoulders fell right into his eyes. Her lips opened slightly. Tarkan. And that voice came out. The moment Tarkan flinched and his body stiffened, Aristine's figure disappeared without a trace. Tarkan looked at the still air and exhaled sharply. What happened just now wasn't because he wanted to imagine it. The words of the core ladies made him keep associating the two, so he couldn't help but think of it. Tarkan covered his eyes with his hands and rubbed his eyes. At that moment, a voice was carried over to him by the night wind. Tarkan slowly lowered his hands from his face, because he felt like he knew who it was. He already knew with one syllable. Aristine looked at him and smiled brightly. After her bath, her skin looked milkier than usual, and her hair was slightly wet. Red cheeks, wet lips, and a night dress. Fortunately, her night dress was normal. The thin, pure white dress didn't have any exposures, so it didn't seem to be a dress made for the first night. He hadn't seen this dress among the night dresses that the court ladies brought to him. Those clothes were as transparent as a dragonfly's wing, and as small as his hands. The night dress Aristine was wearing right now looked light and comfortable. Since it was an ordinary dress, there was no reason for Tarkan to be surprised. However, with every step that Aristine took, her white ankles were exposed before being covered by the skirt of her dress. Her ankles were small, with a slightly pinkish hue. They looked smooth. Tarkan quietly looked up. Immediately, his eyes met Aristine. Her long hair was unraveled and left to flow. Her silver hair swept softly in the wind. The sight of her walking slowly towards him from the end of the hallway overslapped with her figure in the afternoon. Then, too, Aristine walked towards him like this. Her appearance in this comfortable nightdress and her appearance on her gorgeously decorated wedding gown was very different, but they were also similar. Aristine reached in front of Tarkan before he realized it, and she looked up to him. This is perfect timing. She smelled sweet. The scent was similar to standing in a flower bed inside the garden at night. It's been a long day, hasn't it? Come on, let's go to sleep. Aristine stretched out her hand to Tarkan. Under the moonlight's glow, her hand seemed thinner and weaker than usual, and thus hand touched Tarkan's wrist. Maybe it was because she had just taken a bath, but her hand was warm, unlike its coolness during the day. Tarkan couldn't refuse or shake her off. The sensation on his hand was so soft and delicate that it felt like it would disappear if he treated it a little harshly. She grabbed his hand and dragged him along. Every step she took seemed as if petals were crushed beneath her feet, giving rise to a blossoming scent. Tarkan looked at her silver hair, which was swimming through the night sky. It was hard to tell how much time passed. Pluck. Aristine came to a stop. Only then did Tarkan come to his senses. They were in front of the bridal. That's the end of chapter, and that's everything for the whole day. See ya!